And hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode 3 of Exploration with Chuck and Yin. We have some great exploration for you today. Today, my co-host Yin and I are going to be talking about our experience with music, explore our relationship with that, and music's importance as a cultural vehicle for everybody and their opinions, thoughts, and emotions. I did not write out that introduction before I said it, and it was very clear as I was saying it, but we're going to roll with it. I'm Chuck, along with Yin. Yin, if you want to say what's up to the people.
Everybody?
Hey,
What's
hey,
good?
hey.
What's good?
So,
Episode 3.
yes, sir. I feel like a natural way to start this is I'm going to break down my relationship with music, how it formed, and kind of an early sense. When I was a kid, I mean, obviously you're listening to Elmo, Sesame Street, that sort of stuff, Banana Phone. I don't know if you know that song, I End Day, but I remember having that on a little disc or something, listening to that on road trips or whatever. But what really started my interest in music was my father had a collection of records when he was young. He grew up in the sort of 80s era of commonly critically panned hair rock music, you know, Kiss, Motley Crue, that sort of music. But the physical records were super intriguing to me. And because of that, I developed an early interest in that sort of rock and roll. As you well know, my first concert was a Kiss concert with my dad and brother. And although that music lacked a lot of substance, it did sort of spark this interest I had in music that was sort of against the grain, sort of against the mainstream culture, which is what those types of bands aspired to do. My dad actually set me up with, he bought this machine that with a USB cord would record the records onto iTunes, converting them into an MP3 format. But unlike a CD, it didn't have the programming in the record to auto start the next song, to start the next recording, to make them distinct. So I would sit there for hours on end and click a button every time the new song started. I'd be holding the back of the record, looking at the timestamps of when each song started, and be ready to click so that they were all properly divided in iTunes, which was kind of funny.
Dedication.
That was, yeah, you know, I was dedicated to the craft, and that music was definitely my early passion. I would say rock and roll when I was, I don't know, let's say 5th grade to 7th grade especially was my primary genre. And ironically, it wasn't modern rock by any sense. It was this, you know, Kiss, Love Gun was a great album. Loved some Motley Crue because of my dad. Didn't understand that a lot of those songs are about strip clubs and drugs. I just thought they were fun to listen to. And obviously now I would consider my primary genre to be hip hop by a mile. And I'll dive into that evolution a little bit here in a second. But Yin, what do you remember about your early musical influences, and what was your first types of music that you were checking out?
Yeah, so it's interesting you say that about like about being introduced to it by your parents. So my parents, they listen to like a lot of like Earth, Wind and Fire, like Michael Jackson, Stevie Wonder. So like they always like were playing like music like that, R&B on the weekends. But kind of like you said, growing up, I always had like those same like childhood tunes from like TV shows and movies like that. I guess like the most reoccurring early soundtrack that like would play in the car was like the Space Jam soundtrack.
Oh yeah.
Like so, yeah, I remember like we had all those songs memorized, like the Shrek soundtrack. But it's interesting though, because like I played the violin starting when I was like 4, so I had like a big classical music background, and then also, you know, listen to a lot of African music. Like with my dad, with the instruments he would bring back and like the different, CDs he would bring back when he would come back from Africa. So yeah, growing up, I had like a pretty like diverse range of music, and then I guess like in middle school, that's when it was probably like the most like weak was when I was like more interested in like sports and like video games. So I was just listening to what was on the radio. Like when I lived in Buffalo, it was like a big radio type city. So it was really just like radio type hits. But then when I got to Evansville and I became friends with, like you and Isaac. Isaac for sure was probably like my biggest like influence in like putting me on to like J. Cole, for example, and then like that going into like Wale and then like really like understanding like Drake's discography and just like Kendrick's discography and like really listening to albums like front to back and like listening to like all their projects like consecutively. So I would say like, yeah, that was around that time when I really like got into hip hop was when I started learning that like it was more than just, a radio single, but it was like the artist's actual project that like they put through that really, like Born Center, for example, was like one of the first times where I saw like beats from like one song transition, into the next song where it's like, oh yeah, like they want you to listen to this like in this order. So that's like when that whole love for like the whole art and process that comes with hip hop, like when that started to develop.
And for those who are unaware, Born Center, the second studio album from J. Cole, still a very mainstream rapper to this day. I have a couple things to pick apart from what you just said. One, the Shrek soundtracks were unbelievable. Talk about great taste, spectacular stuff there. When you talked about classical music, I actually had a phase when I was very young, like still missing teeth, where my grandparents gave me this like leather, for lack of a better word, suitcase full of cassettes that were all Beethoven. And although I don't remember this specifically, my parents enjoy telling the stories of how I would be missing teeth and I would be, I'm going to go upstairs and listen to some Beethoven. And, and I really think I loved the process more of putting the cassettes into the player than the actual music, but that was certainly influential. And then similar to you, my dad was a very big proponent of listening to records, not singles. Obviously, in a pre-internet age, getting an album was the quintessential way to listen to music. And you were listening to that full album. You weren't picking apart songs. You weren't making playlists. Like that just simply wasn't an option technologically. And there was a period, I think, in the early 2000s where that was sort of lost, but especially in the hip hop genre, that has persisted as the primary artistic way to listen to music, which I really appreciate. My shift from this sort of hair band rock and roll to hip hop occurred late in middle school, probably right before around the time I met you, where it was sort of like a peer pressure situation where I felt like I had to know the pop songs relevant to the time. And I found myself enjoying more than the other pop songs, the pop songs that had a feature rapper. Like one that pops in my mind quickly is Let It Rock that had Lil Wayne in it, and it was like a rock pop song, but also had a verse. And then slowly I started shifting more and more towards hip hop. And like a lot of white middle class or even more affluent people like myself, Eminem was kind of the first true rapper that I really became drawn to. And part of that was because he was rapping about the sort of like, white anger, teenage sort of thing. Oh, your parents don't know what's best for you sort of stuff. And that became attractive to me. And it was the album Recovery with Not Afraid. I listened to Not Afraid a lot, man.
Yeah,
I really did.
Before every basketball game.
Oh, it got me right. But because of that, I started exploring earlier stuff in Eminem's discography. and started to develop an ear for true hip hop rappability. And because of that, I evolved into discovering that, oh, this is actually the genre that I enjoy the most. You also briefly spoke about video game soundtracks, NBA Live, later NBA 2K for me was very influential in like what songs were cool. Oh, I really like this song. I wouldn't have been introduced to that song in any other way if not for a video game soundtrack. And that was another big part of my shift. And I think I've talked to you a little bit about this. It was kind of a natural thing to happen. I was a kid that basketball was my favorite sport. Not only that, but my favorite hobby, favorite thing to do. I loved basketball shoes and sort of that streetwear culture, the basketball shoes, the actual sport of basketball and hip hop create this kind of triangle of culture that it's very hard to have a full love and appreciation for one corner of that triangle without understanding and appreciating the other corners. And because of that, my interest in hip hop happened organically, although for a few years there, it was obviously very poppy rap. Like I listened to B.O.B. probably more than I would like to admit for a period there.
We all did.
Who else? There were a few. I mean, I remember like Iaz. You remember that Replay song? Shawty's like
so for anything on the radio, bro, like Jay Sean, bro, like Jason Derulo had bangers back in the day, bro. Like there's a lot of people back there who had a lot of like radio shine.
You remember Tayo Cruz?
Tayo Cruz. This sound from bro. What song he had?
I'm trying to remember right now. I can picture him. He wore like those very early to mid 2000s decade type glasses. Shoot, I can't remember a specific song right now, but yeah, that genre of music, that era of music was obviously right as we were kind of coming of age and was very important.
Drake was the king of that era though. That's like really where all the young money was just like taking over the radio and just running everything, all the charts.
I didn't look it up before this. I think Recovery by Eminem was probably 2009, maybe 2010. So that's 8th grade or so. And I think Take Care was 2011. So that all adds up in my mental timeline of my music tastes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, around freshman year was when I really was like listening back to when Isaac put me on to Friday Night Lights. No, not Friday Night Lights, Sideline Story. And then that's like when I was listening to that like every day, all day, every day. And then like started like watching the videos, and then Isaac put me on to, like the different vlogs and just like different past albums and things like that. Because J. Cole, he's been putting out a whole bunch of content ever since he really started.
Yeah, he for both of us was, I mean, I would say my first, in terms of a guy in his prime, favorite rapper. I mean, obviously I was retroactively a big Eminem fan for a while. And even though I blindly thought he was in his prime at the time, I didn't have the taste to realize that he certainly was not.
Right.
So
you remember? Our first concert we went to too was well, not your first concert. We went to Kiss, but like our first concert, I think, like without our parents. That when we went to up in Indy, that Wale concert.
Yeah, Wale was a big one as well.
Yeah, because
he kind of fell off, unfortunately. I really liked his early stuff.
Right, but he was big back then. Like that's back when. Because that concert, it was cool. Like it was like in the Egyptian Room, downtown Indy. But it was I just remember it was like a good road trip because I think it was like you, me, Ryan, and Curtis and Carlos. It was
Sounds
good
right.
vibes. Yeah,
absolutely, a lot of fun. And then, I mean, this kind of carries over to the stuff I was talking about earlier with the rock and roll. It's kind of For whatever reason, part of my personality, part of the way my brain's structured, that I really don't like knowing less about a topic that I feel is important to me than other people. So going back to rock and roll, I went back and went deep into a lot of these bands' discographies to, frankly, for partially my enjoyment, but a larger part, frankly, for the sake of conversation, to come across as educated and understanding about these groups that weren't really relevant to anybody of our generation. But that carried over to hip hop as well. Once I really started getting into it, I wasn't really satisfied with what the top hits were on the radio, or more prevalent to me at the time, the top songs on iTunes. And because of that, I went back, and I mean, I remember in high school listening to 50 Cent, to a bunch of projects that were several years old at that point, for the sake of conversation and for the sake of, when relating to people, me coming across as someone who understands what I was talking about, which, it's probably some deeper psychological thing that I have to figure out about myself, but it did serve me well when it came to music knowledge. And then I think it was 2012 when Good Kid, Mad City dropped, which, I mean, I think regardless of your musical predisposition, was a big project for anyone in high school and likely college at that time. That was, Kendrick was probably the first West Coast rapper that I really got into, and because of that opened doors into me looking into past rap groups, from NWA to solo artists like Dr. Dre, who at least supposedly had an heavy influence on that project, as well as people related to him, Snoop. And then eventually I dove into the big names of Tupac and Biggie. But a lot of those historically relevant rappers were not a big part of my musical rotation until I got into college. Yin, do you have any other reflections on your high school era music tastes?
Yeah, I would say that pretty much after getting exposed to J. Cole and then, Kendrick, that definitely, brought that whole rabbit hole into the Nas, Jay-Z. And then also, when I got like my first iPhone, that really changed like everything. Cause like when I had my iPod, I didn't like download too much music, but when I got like my iPhone 4S, that's like when I started downloading like everything that was on that page. So like just all like a whole bunch of like mixtapes were coming out during that time. So like current music that way. Then also like starting to like dabble into like the more, fundamental historical type tapes as well.
Yeah,
But
I remember Dat Piff for me. I went through a period where I was listening to a lot of Kid Ink. You remember Kid Ink?
yeah, I remember
Dude, I
Kidding.
loved Kid Ink.
Yeah, Kidding had some bangers. I remember King Los all over that piff. I remember I used to listen to like Meek Mill. That's back when I like Big Sean, like Big Sean's early mixtapes.
Yeah, back when
I
he
actually
was
listened to, like
cool.
Detroit, yeah, and then he just started just I ain't even gonna speak on Big Sean. I ain't even speaking on Big Sean on this podcast, man.
Yeah, that whole Dat Piff era, I guess it kind of evolved into the modern SoundCloud era, but those releases were a big deal, and it was a good business model. I mean, I'm sure there were other mixtape hosting services, but I mean, that's the period where like Lil Wayne's mixtapes were becoming
So yeah,
legendary.
the
Acid
dedication.
Rap by Chance was, I mean, still his best project, but I mean, that was a big one when it dropped. Big Sean, like you mentioned, Cole had a couple
I mean,
tapes,
even
and
Wiz Khalifa was dropping like
oh yeah,
fire on that piff. Yeah, like think
Kush and
Kevin.
OJ.
Yeah, for sure. And even what was that one? It had like all them was that 28 grams? I think that's what it was. I don't remember.
Well, and Chief Keef too. I remember when Chief Keef first dropped and we were in high school, and that
Right.
he was cool as hell.
been the go 300.
And so, but that was sort of semi-mainstream rap. But as
I
I
would,
got into, oh, go ahead.
I would say Kendrick though was like definitely that introduction to a rapper like who was really good at rapping. Like not just the subject matter, but also like the art of rapping, like, bar for bar, different similes to metaphors, like just lining up like, the actual lines and the stanzas that actually like match up with this numerical format. Like he was actually like that first rapper that I actually saw that was really doing that, and then like consistently at that level in which where he's just dropping projects when he wants to drop them, which I feel like is why this whole Drake and Kanye thing is kind of like getting more interesting now that like Kendrick is showing up on the scene too.
Yeah, well, oh, let's just get into that now. Obviously, Kendrick and Baby Keem just dropped a tape and, or excuse me, a song and a phenomenal music video. I'm not sure I've seen a
Yeah,
music video quite like that before. Um, and it turns out of the three, Kendrick was the first to officially drop some stuff, which is interesting. The one thing going back to his Oklahoma, if I'm pronouncing that how he plans to, website, he says this that he's working on his final album that he's producing with TDE, which when I first read that screamed, oh, it's an album by Kendrick Lamar. But it is a possibility that he is executively producing this Baby Keem album and, probably featured on more than one song, hopefully. But perhaps that is what this whole marketing campaign has been referring to and not literally a Kendrick project, which would be semi disappointing, but it will be interesting to see how that develops and especially how that interplays with this Drake Kanye beef, which seems to be gaming scheme online by the day.
is Baby King TDE?
Um, at the end of the music video, there is a TDE logo, so I assume. I also know he's related in some way to Kendrick, so the amount of support he has, I think Kendrick would have the pull to get him a TDE sign. So
Right. Yeah, because I think they cousins. Like I'm like 90% sure that they cousins, but I know that Baby Keem, he's in PG Lang, Kendrick's new company he's got with his video producer Dave Free. It's like that company they got that's like supposed to be, different multimedia, like from albums, videos, short films, things like that. So I saw that they've been like promoting and putting out like a lot of Baby King videos. And then they did that rollout with Calvin Klein, in which like they produced those for them. So I didn't know if I was kind of thinking that maybe this was Kendrick's, maybe if he's doing like the one final project under TDE, and then like he's gonna just transition into just PG Lang, because like that's like really strictly his business, his company. So to see if like he's just gonna put out things for Baby Keem, and like I don't know, I feel like he might put out more projects under his own stuff under PG Lang. Like this could be like, yeah, like that last TDE piece.
yeah, I think that makes sense, and it's kind of a natural evolution in hip hop. I mean, Kendrick is frankly bigger than the average artist who leaves their label and goes and makes their own thing. That's a common cycle in the genre. I was lucky enough to take Survey of Hip Hop at IU, which introduced me to not only the history of the development of hip hop, but also some of these old artists. Like if it weren't for this class, I don't think I would have listened to, for example, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. I wouldn't have the appreciation for Rakim and Eric B that I do, which they're, I mean, crucial figures in the history of hip hop. I think one thing that your average mainstream music listener doesn't understand is that back at hip hop's origin, it was literally a way to host a party. So whoever the DJ was, hosting the party, figured out what part of the songs people enjoyed dancing to the most. And they would spin the record in a way that that part of the song would play over and over and over, which evolved into sampling to an extent. And then the DJ himself was the star. So I said Rakim and Eric B earlier. The actual name of the group is Eric B and Rakim. Rakim, one of the greatest lyricists in hip hop history. Eric B, the DJ. And he was listed first because early on, the DJ was the star of the show. And then he had a less significant hype man who would yell to the crowd, ayo, 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 stuff like that. And eventually it evolved into saying things and coming up with clever little rhymes like, put your hands in the air if you just don't care. And eventually over time that evolved into bars, evolved into rapping, and that created the current ecosystem of hip hop that we currently have, where obviously the rapper is the front man of the group, so to say, and the DJ takes sort of a back seat most of the time, the producer in modern terms. And so that was all super fascinating. And obviously in that era as well, that was before hip hop was big enough that a hip hop song going big had enough financial support in terms of listeners that there was really ever a legal issue with sampling. So it was kind of a free for all. You could sample whatever song you wanted. You didn't need legal permission. And at that time, there weren't enough ears listening to rap that ever became a legal issue. A rap historical sort of insight is the first time that sampling really became a legal issue is Vanilla Ice's Ice Ice Baby. Surprise, the first really, really big hip hop song was, of course, an appropriating white guy, whatever.
Right.
But he sampled a song and, he went platinum or whatever, maybe just gold. I don't know how different that was in an exclusively radio era. But that was the first time there was a major lawsuit, and that eventually led to the modern apparatus of sampling and having legal permission to sample whatever song you're sampling from being so important. Obviously, mixtapes on websites such as DatPiff or in a modern context, SoundCloud, there's not that profitability from the songs you're posting on those websites. So you can still sample from whatever. That's why on those sites, you have rappers getting on other people's beats that they don't necessarily have legal permission to use. That's why if you try to listen to acid rap on SoundCloud or Apple Music Now, Chance the Rapper's, most famous mixtape, there's one song that does not appear on those streaming services that was on the original tape because he has yet to gain legal permission to profit from the song he sampled. And hip hop's just a really strange and unique genre when it comes to all of that. What would you say that you've noticed is the biggest shift from this DatPiff era that was the initial root of our hip hop fandom into this current SoundCloud era, for lack of a better term? Have you noticed any shifts when it comes to either the quantity of music out there, the quality, or just overall sound?
I would say like the biggest shift for me that I've seen has definitely been like the transition to just straight streaming. I feel like that's been like the biggest influence on the rap game right now. Just because like you look on Fridays, that like projects are gonna drop. And it's kind of like set it up for artists that like you almost gotta plan out when you want to drop if that's like kind of what you care about, looking at your competition wise, because you do have some artists that drop a lot of projects at high rates, that still keep up that high quality of work too. And then you have different artists that drop once a year, once every year and a half, that are very highly anticipated projects, but those those different artists that are dropping, week after week, month after month, they're keeping their names like in the papers more, in the headlines, on the charts more. And like that's definitely keeping their streams up there and keeping their pockets and their revenue up too. So I definitely see with streaming at a point where like it can impact, like the quality of the sound. But I feel like a lot of artists, they have like the integrity to like keep putting out like that high quality work, regardless like what rate they got to do it at.
It's interesting you brought up the number of projects, because one thing I've noticed in the past, I don't know, 3 years, let's say, is that projects also seem to have more individual tracks, like stuff like Migos, Culture 2 pop into mind, several Drake projects that are over 20 songs, that I don't think would have been formatted that way in even the old iTunes model where every song was individually bought. Now having more songs on your project when someone listens to through, if you're making money off of 22 streams instead of 12 every time someone listens to your project all the way through, that adds up. That's more money in your pocket. I don't
Right.
have any concrete evidence of people intentionally doing that, but that's something I've wondered and noticed. I mean, obviously in hip hop there's been a trend of double albums. I mean, Tupac's All Eyes on Me and I think 96 ish was a double album, quite long. Outkast obviously did their double album, Speaker Box and The Love Below. But those are very distinct from these super, frankly, bloated in my mind, projects that a lot of artists drop now. And I kind of wonder if part of that motivation to include some of those mid songs is just so that's one more thing for people to click on and therefore a little more money in your pocket.
Yeah, it's just for me, you can kind of just now see that like a lot of artists are kind of just taking all their best tracks that they've like made in the studio over X amount of time and just like kind of making a playlist of like their best sounds versus artists who sit down and like create like their full project, regardless of how long it takes, but like having each song be dedicated to that project. So yeah, you can definitely tell like in the industry, you dang near really just gotta like choose your own lane on whether you gonna do it off of like just straight revenue or like do it off of your words and your bars for real. Because like you can definitely take the business route or you can take the other route, but at the end of the day, you still gonna have to put food on the table. So that's why you see a lot of rappers making their revenue off of not just streams, but different tours, merch. So I definitely know that like COVID definitely put, a wrench in a lot of people's money just because like they couldn't go on tours. So, Rolling Loud this past, what was it, like a couple weekends ago, I think like almost every rapper was there. And then like Lollapalooza was like the weekend after. So yeah, we've just seen like yeah, every weekend just different rappers out there, putting on these different concerts, doing private shows. I saw Lil Uzi was somewhere at like a private wedding, like yeah, just trying to get their money up.
Kind of in that Lil Uzi vein, what do you make of this sort of mainstream hip hop trend that I think was pushed forward significantly by Juice World? And now you got cats like the Kid Leroy, kind of fits that mold where it's barely hip hop. It's sort of this pop. R&B is not the right word. It's definitely a hip hop beat, but it's a sing-songy interpretation of how to make that music. It seems very mainstream on these streaming services, getting a lot of
Man,
numbers.
I would first of all, I ain't gonna give no Lil Uzi slander on this podcast.
No, I
Lil
think
Uzi,
he's distinct from
and no,
that, but it's
I just
related.
want everybody to know like Lil Uzi make music, like that's facts. But I think like this whole yeah, like melodic type rap, like I think it has its own lane. You know what I'm saying? I would never compare it to, like the greats, but I think it definitely has its space. And I feel like a lot of the greats, do recognize that. Like Nas just said on his last project, he said like just imagine Lil Uzi on one of his beats. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just or himself on one of Migos beats. Like I don't know, just kind of seeing that like we ain't gotta keep like comparing apples and oranges. Like I kind of bring this up in the whole argument, like when people compare rappers like J. Cole to Drake, the difference like pop rappers versus like the lyrical rappers. Like I definitely feel like pop has this lane, and then lyricism has this lane. But like I wouldn't compare the two. I definitely feel like like this new category of melodic type rap, kind of like that. Like you said, Juice World. Um,
The Kid Leroy.
I don't even know who the kid. He
You don't know who the Kid Leroy is?
he's the white one,
He's
right?
major. Yeah, he I mean
I know. I seen it. Okay, okay.
he's
I'm
got the
capping. I'm
lyrical
capping.
lemonade
I'm
stamp of
capping.
approval, so
Yeah, yeah.
he's big.
Yeah, I definitely feel like they have a lane in the rap game, and just like I feel like mumble rap does too, to an extent as well. Like yeah, there's just so many like different facets. Yeah, because I saw this tweet the other day that was like actually had me weak. That said, Michael Jackson will love Playboy Cardi, and like it just had me weak because the type of music that and the way that like Playboy Cardi, like Lil Uzi, and like them be acting, like I just feel like Michael Jackson did all that first, like just kind of like being weird to like the media and like to society. And like I feel like yeah, like all these different branches of like hip hop and rap and R&B is just like us showing our ways of like different creativity. Because really, it's like when you look back to it, like you said, it kind of do sound like rock and roll, and like you do could hear a lot of um these different artists on those type of beats. That's why I always appreciate like the Tiny Desk. So when you can just like hear him like straight a cappella, or like cause yeah, Young Thug, he did his Tiny Desk with like a rock band. So yeah, just like hearing that type of stuff and hearing the versatility with all of it.
I actually see, as you said, a lot of parallels between rock and roll and hip hop. I mean, you look at the history of rock and roll, obviously. I mean, Elvis was kind of the first mainstream rock star. Old heads didn't get what he was doing by any means, but the young people understood the energy and might have been more slow moving than hip hop has been. But it went from this sort of outsider genre to a genre that everyone was aware of as kind of representing the youth, the counterculture, the anti-establishment sort of rebelliousness of young people to eventually going full mainstream and being the most relevant and important genre in the world. And then after that, the genre gets very diluted by people chasing numbers, by just the quantity of music out there that a lot of it was not critically well received, even though if it was commercially doing numbers. And then it sort of starts to fall off. And then you have for rock and roll, the sort of grunge era, these people trying to get back to rock and roll's roots, like, oh, we're making this music in our garage, not a studio. Like that's what that's all about. And now it's to the point where what even is rock and roll anymore? I mean, I'm sure there's some big rock heads that are like, oh, you're ignoring. Like I think Swans is a very well received rock group these days. But overall, it's not what it once was, and because of how much I love and enjoy hip hop, I kind of worry that it might be on the same trajectory where it started out as this outside of the mainstream genre. We're now at the point where hip hop is more mainstream than pop, which pop being short for popular music is kind of contradictory in itself. Hip hop is pop now. And you kind of worry that it's happening right now where the market for hip hop music is becoming oversaturated, just as what happened with rock and roll. And that, maybe SoundCloud rap is your version of grunge for rock. I don't know how you'd make that comparison perfectly. There might be a better one, but there is something in the back of my mind like, ugh, in 25 years, what will hip hop be? Will it eventually fall out of favor, just like what happened with rock and roll, from being the top, the craziest concerts, the mosh pits, the people doing drugs and crazy stuff. I mean, that's what hip hop is now. And eventually the people at those concerts, just like rock concerts now, could theoretically just be old dudes with gray hair reminiscing on the old days, and some other genre comes up into favor. I'm not wishing that on hip hop at all, but there is part of me that wonders if that's just a natural evolution of music genres.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like as long as there's artistry involved, like it's gonna thrive. And like with that being said, like I mean, I feel like yeah, if Black people invent a new version of music, I mean, I guess that's gonna be the next version of music that's popular. So shit, if that happens, I'm excited to see it happen. But I mean, with that being said, like I feel like what's been cool and what's gonna be there, like I said, with the artistry piece is that yeah, there's always gonna be like that group that's gonna be chasing the money. And like as long as there are a group of people in Hollywood right now that like are making money off of, you know, people's words and their talents, like that's gonna be prevalent. But I feel like what's been cool now, like with the artistry aspect, like even kind of how you said before with like the evolution of DJs, like right now, you know, DJs, there's so many different types. You know, I have friends and brothers like DJ Draftpick, who can control a crowd, you know, who is literally out there mixing music, putting it, lining up the beats per minute, you know, checking the vibe of the crowd, understanding like what type of music they want to hear, if it's gonna be a R&B type night or a throwback 2000s type night or just straight pop hits right now, you know, that type of DJ who is literally like, you know, mixing the music, literally like on the turntables. And versus like we, you know, we got producers nowadays that like literally are taking the job of putting together the entire project. You know, I feel like one of my favorites who gets to do that is like Metro Boomin. Like when he teams up with 21 Savage, like they did with that Morgan Freeman, where like I said, like each beat is like building into the next one, where like he's taking you like on his own journey, actually like yeah, leading you into each song one by one. So I feel like yeah, that the whole I don't know. I feel like as long as there's the ability to like put your own spin onto the project, whether that be with like your subject matter or your cadence or your beats selection, and then also yeah, how they flow into one another, like the the prevalence of the art of hip hop is always going to be able to like thrive.
Well, and I think that's a big difference that I didn't acknowledge with my comparison between hip hop and rap. It was highlighted in this class that I've brought up a few times. Um, Hip hop is a culture that happens to have a music genre associated with it, while rock was exclusively a music genre that then a culture was born out of. And I think that's an important thing. Like graffiti, dancing, all of those hip hop elements, streetwear, predate the mainstreamization, for lack of a better word, of hip hop. And so in theory, the culture of hip hop's always going to persist. And that's why artists that we just referred to, like a Juice World, who is really making pop music, can be categorized as hip hop because that's the cultural area that he's coming from. And so because of that, you call it hip hop, even though he's not rapping.
I mean, I feel like that gets technical though, because like hip hop is like black culture. So like it's hard to be like a white dude making hip hop. Like I don't know, like cause yeah, like you said, people like Young Thug, you know, he really transcends this entire discussion of music. Or like, you know, even yeah, like Andre 3000, like Outkast, like things like that, because like they do have hip hop culture, but they also display so many different types of cultures, like not only like in their clothing, but like I was saying earlier, like in their subject matter and stuff too. Because like
Yeah.
they rapping still, but like
But at the same time, you can go to any Midwestern white family wedding and you're going to hear Hey Ya played probably.
Right. So like yeah, like what's like what's the culture? You know what I'm saying? Like it
That's
is the
fair.
culture. Yeah, like they run. Yeah, like they running it. Like as I said, like Lil Nas X, for example, like he had everybody up in arms over like appropriating country music. Like people were mad he had Billy Ray Cyrus and like he was winning like a country music award. And I don't think like any of his songs after that first one ever sounded like had any country type, you know, aspect. So I feel like I don't know, it's just like hard to decipher like what's like into a genre because like there's so many artists out here that like really be breaking down those barriers all the time.
Totally. Um,
Selena Quintanilla, shout out Selena Quintanilla, you know, she was singing in Spanish, English, all of that. Like rest in peace, Selena. This is Selena fan page, all of that.
I'm gonna use this opportunity to go ahead and shout out several rappers that I hope everyone listening to this podcast is familiar with, but I think are phenomenal. And if you aren't, they're worth giving their discography a listen. I mean, obviously, recently RIP MF Doom. I am concerned that a lot of people were posting MF Doom related to images on their Instagram stories or whatever after he passed without ever really giving his music much of a chance. I mean, obviously, Mad Villainy is his most famous project. He worked with Madlib, produced that whole project, who, I mean, is famous in a modern context for working with Freddie Gibbs on a couple albums. But I mean, his first album, Operation Doomsday, Food, another great one. It's also hard to find a lot of his music because he worked under a lot of other aliases. So that like just searching MF Doom on Spotify or whatever is not going to reveal all of his stuff. Rakim, who I mentioned briefly, is widely considered the first rapper ever to truly rap in a modern sense. I mean, you go back, you listen to someone like Slick Rick, who is iconic in his own right. He wasn't really rapping as we would imagine. It's kind of like it was before all the basic bars had gotten out of the way. So still
Slick
doing
Rick had bars. He was
well, yeah.
spitting,
But
yeah.
like
Yeah,
you in that era, you could still do like a Dr. Seuss bar and no one had heard
yeah,
it before.
for sure.
So Rakim is an all-time great. Ice Cube's solo work, I feel like doesn't get the amount of love it should. He's kind of just like, oh, NWA, and then he became an actor. No, he had a several year run there in the mid to late '90s of some truly classic albums. And honestly, a better rapper than Dr. Dre by a mile. And Dr. Dre has a couple classics as well, but Ice Cube does not get his due day. And then I feel like a lot of people are aware of Biggie and Tupac's like main hits, but haven't really listened to their deep discographies. I mean, Biggie only released two albums while alive. Both those are classics. But Tupac's early stuff, similarly, I feel like a lot of people don't give love, as well as the album he released under the alias Machiavelli that came out after he passed. But it's sort of like it's a level actually closer to the original artistic version than like Mac Miller's Circles, where Tupac had heard all of those songs before he passed. So that's truly a Tupac album. It wasn't altered hardly at all. I think the order of the tracks was the only thing altered after he passed. Outkast is another group that I feel like a lot of people only know their mainstream stuff. But like Southern Playalistic Cadillac Music, their first album, everyone needs to give that a listen to. And then Miss Lauryn Hill doesn't get her due day either. The Fugees album, The Score, phenomenal. Her solo album, Miseducation with Lauryn Hill, excuse me, is commonly referred to. The album art has been mimicked by several rappers on their mixtapes, and there's a reason why. So I think all of those artists, if you consider yourself a true hip hop head, you need to give them their due time and give all their projects a solid listen. Oh, one more real quick. Big Pun only released one album before he died, but whew, it's great. not as mainstream as the other people I listen to, but listed, but great project in its own right.
Well, I'm gonna say to add to that list, y'all need to make sure y'all know and y'all listen to all of the work by Obutni Lee, the
Yes,
guy.
sir.
I need y'all to listen to Kelso Melrose. I need y'all to listen to Dakar Justice. I need y'all to listen to Almighty Foe, Jordan, the Good Boy, Arnett, Jay Real, Sunny Toure, and Kevon Red.
And
And
FTWEB.
FTWEB. I need everybody to listen to everything FTW. I need everybody who is from Evansville, who's from Bloomington, from Indy, from Gary, from Champaign, from Denver, from Chicago, from LA, from Texas. Definitely to just tap in with they talent in their city too, and definitely like uplift their people because there's so much talent like how we always be talking about in our friend group, but just like in this circle of people that we met, also in school, through different and also through different just like life events and circumstances. But just thankful for like all the people that we got out here that are just like making great music and music that like they care about, not just putting out just any old thing, but like music that they really like put their heart and soul to. And like I got faith, and I know that like all my brothers gonna blow up. Because yeah, they definitely put in that work and have like the portfolio to speak for it. So that too.
Absolutely. I mean, you consider yourself a hip hop fan. You got to give these guys a listen. That's the difference between you really being a pop fan and a hip hop fan is getting onto these artists before they blow up. And we're plugging you with a couple
Where
people.
was that we was dead broke starving, huh? So yeah, I'm interested. I'm interested to see how this Donda stuff work out, and like also this certified lover boy. Because I said that episode one, bro. Like they playing with each other. Because you saw that yeah, Drake like hacked the CNN. I mean the Sports Center.
Yeah. Yeah. So me and Yen have been really lucky. We've been surrounded by people that are musically literate, and we're able to find both the mainstream, the music off the beaten path, and that music, as you referred to, has been uplifting for both of us. And I mean, now in the past handful of years, we've been lucky to have friends that are making music, frankly, more uplifting than any music I can hear, because they're talking about themselves, their lives, and it's just really powerful stuff to hear. So again, rewind, go back, listen to that list of names Allende listed off, because they're all great at what they do. They're working hard, and in 4 years you'll have the opportunity to seem really cool because you were on Obutni Lee before he really made it. So
Yeah, man.
that's how you get that music cred.
Yeah, don't wait too late. Don't wait till it's too late. We'll still accept you then, but we just know you're fake.
All right. Any closing thoughts, Ian?
Nah, man. Just everybody stay safe out here and stay blessed.
Yes, sir. I second all that. And we want to thank you again for listening to episode 3 of Exploration with Chuck and Yin. It's becoming almost routine at this point. Unbelievable.
Yeah,
But
you know how we get down. We ain't playing about it. Come on now.
all right. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to you stopping by next week.
Peace.